Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Kattie Lail, who is a addiction wellness peer coach and supervisor for Face It Together. Kattie, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this conversation. I think it's a subject that needs to be talked about. Before we get into the conversation, just introduce yourself to the audience in your own words. Who is Kattie today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Katie today is a lot different than Katie 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. But today, I would say that my life is based on a journey of wellness. And along that journey of wellness and healing, I like to try to help others along their journey of wellness and healing, whether that be from addiction or whether it be, if you have somebody struggling with addiction, being able to support those folks as well. In addition to that, I'm a mother to a young son, and we're about ready to have a second one. So me and my husband are very excited about that. Two Great Danes, cat. We just kind of live in a zoo, so life is very busy.
I'm sure. Well, congratulations on the new one coming as well. But that's exciting, I'm sure. But yeah, so I wanted to have you on the show. You know, you're an addictions counselor. You're doing work. You lived that life, and now, as you've gone through your recovery process, you want to, give back and help others who are going through that. So, tell me a little bit first, about your background and your own battles with addiction, and how you came through that, and why once you came through it, you wanted to give back.
Yeah, so that's a lot of ground to cover. So everybody brace yourself. So, my addiction started pretty young. Both of my parents struggled with their own meth addiction. And so I kind of grew up, with that on the periphery, or periphery. I didn't necessarily know that they were using drugs when I was young. But as I started entering, like, 12, 13, those kind of things became aware to me. And that was also kind of when things started to really fall apart in our household. So I lived with my mom and my stepdad. And at this point in time, my dad was struggling pretty hard with his addiction and was kind of in and out of prison. And my mom and stepdad were kind of going through divorce, and he drove trucks, so he was gone often. And my mom was at the height of her addiction, so she would leave and go to the bar, and she'd say, oh, I'm going to go get groceries, or oh, I'm going to run and do this. And just we wouldn't see her for a few days, and you could call the bar, like we knew where she was at, and you could hear him say, "Hey, Lori, somebody's on the phone for you," and oh, tell him I'm not there. And so that was, when I was like 12, 13. I have younger siblings who, at the time were like 4 and 6. So, they were young. And so I was trying to just make things as normal as I could around the house for them. And it was just a really difficult time. And it was around that time that I started, having friends over, drinking, smoking weed, just like as like a coping thing. And then I realized, sometimes if I did those things with my mom, she would hang out with me. And so we started kind of having a friendship type of relationship rather than like a mother-daughter type relationship. But I was looking for any connection I could have with her. And so um it kind of went like that for a couple of years. And then when I was 15, she was using meth, and at this point she was using in front of me, so I was aware of her use, and I asked if I could get high with her, and she let me. And so that was the first time that I ever did meth. And from there, I just really hit the ground running. For me, it was like an all inclusive lifestyle. Like it was everything was surrounded around that. It was all about finding more. You had a built-in group of people who you all had the same goals, and it just was a really good fit for me to distract me from everything else in life. And so I became addicted really quick. Um, I used on and off up until I was 19. The only time that I was really off at that time was, if I was in trouble or had to go to treatment or anything like that. But when I was 19, I got arrested for my first time as an adult, and that was really scary for me. And I spent 6 months in county jail, waiting to be sentenced, not knowing what was going on. And that's a lot of time to contemplate things and seemed really overwhelming. And for me, I was like, this isn't the life that I want to be living. And I really could, like, for the first time, see my mom in like a clear view. Because I was older, I wasn't as dependent on her, and just a lot of things had happened. And I was like, that's not actually the life that I want to live. That's not what I want for myself. I think that I can do more. Um, so I got out of jail, committed to not using, but I had no idea how to live that lifestyle. So I kind of latched on to the first person that I could, who was a guy that I really loved, I really cared about, but I also became really dependent on him. He came from a good family. Like, he knew how to, do things like pay bills and maintain a job and all those things that like were really foreign to me. And so he helped me a lot during that time to kind of get on my feet. But his commitment to being in recovery, like, kind of faded pretty fast. And so as he went back into that lifestyle, like, I tried to stop him, but I ended up just kind of like, can't beat him, join him. And we did that cycle for 9 years. And so after that 9 years, we, towards the end there, I came up with this like crazy idea. He'd been doing good for a little while, and in my mind I was like, okay, so if we can have a baby, that's going to be the thing that's going to keep him sober. Like, that's going to be the thing that's going to hold this family together. And so we started doing fertility treatments, went through a lot of like hormone therapy. I wasn't able to have kids. I was really struggling with grief from that, and just kind of the relationship crumbling apart. He went back to using, and like, I was still so desperate to have this kid. I there was a moment when I took a pause and I was like, what am I actually doing? Like, I can't even bring a kid into this life. And what am I doing, like, staying in this relationship? Because I'm just going to end up sunk again if I just stay. So I left, got my own apartment for the first time, in my adult life. And it felt good, but I was really lonely. And I was really grieving, and still, I'd never been alone in my adult life. So it was a really difficult time for me. And I ended up just kind of caving anyways and going back to, like, the thing that I knew would comfort me. And I went back to using. Um, but at this point in time, I'm not 19 anymore. I'm 29. I'm too old to be living on people's couches. And so I'm like, what am I going to do to, like, support myself? And so I was like, well, I could just buy this little bit of drugs and I could just sell it, and that'll be enough to, pay this rent. But for me, that escalated really quickly because it felt really good to, make that fast money, to feel like I was in control of a situation for once in my life. And it felt powerful. Like, I felt um safe, which is weird because it's not actually a safe lifestyle. So I started selling drugs. And then, 6 months after I relapsed and started selling drugs, I was getting my door kicked in by the federal government and on my way to federal prison. And so it was at the moment when I was sitting in jail that I was like, I'm probably going to be in prison for the next 10 years, like, no questions asked. Like, that's just like what was going through my mind. I was like, I got to do something different because I can't keep doing this over and over and over again. And so that was the moment when I decided to make some changes and really do like that self-reflective work that needs to be done to get to a better place.
Yeah. And then you were in prison for 3 years, correct?
Yes. So yeah, I thought for sure I was going to be there for 10. Like, that was just like what I always heard. Like, if you get arrested federally, you're just going for 10 years. Um, but I ended up getting a 5-year sentence. And then from there, if you do the drug program in prison, which was a really great program, you get a year taken off your sentence. And so, um, and then, you get some good time kind of splashed in there with halfway house time. So I ended up being around 3 years. Um, and yeah, that was also a really challenging time in my life, but
Yeah. So once you went through that and you got out of prison, at what point in your life um, did you determine that you wanted to help others who were going through what you went through?
so I think it started even before I went to prison. So when I was in that relationship and I was still like in a pretty unhealthy place, like relationship wise, I had long chunks of time where I wasn't using any substances. Like I was in recovery or whatever you want to call it at the time. But um so I during that time I went to school. I got my bachelor's degree in human services with my minor in addiction studies. And I had worked as an addictions counselor during that time. And I think for me at like I always knew I wanted to help others and I always knew I had that capacity within me, but I think that at that time I was doing it to prove to myself and my family and anybody who knew me that I was okay, rather than like doing it because I actually felt like I was in a place of wellness. And so I went to prison, and a couple years after I got out and I'd been really focusing on me, I knew that that was my calling. I knew that that was my purpose. I knew that that was where I found fulfillment and knew that I was helping others. And so I knew it was time for me to go back and like in a more genuine place. And that was when I ran into Face It Together.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about where you're at now and face it together. Um, you know, it's what I guess what is the style that you guys are bringing to, the recovery space, so to speak?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And for me, it was the first introduction that I had to anything besides like the hardcore, like 12-step model. And so I remember doing my interview and they're like, we believe in harm reduction. We really want to meet people where they're at. Like we don't, dictate what people's goals are. We want to help people define what their goals are and then help them reach those. Um, and so it's really person centered. Um, if we have somebody come in and they're like, I really need to quit doing meth, but I don't think that I'm ready to quit smoking pot. Like that's not where I'm at. We're like, okay, let's work with that. I think we can make this happen. And we can monitor it as we go along. But not only that, we don't just focus on the substance use. It's more than the substance use. Often the substance use is a side effect of whatever is like actually going on. So we really want to look at that whole person. We really want to look at like, why are you using? What can we look at back there? And oftentimes, if you can address that why with the person, the use becomes easier to put to the side and manage and getting to a better place. So it's cool because all of our coaches have personal experience. So all of our person with addiction coaches have had struggled with their own addiction before. Um, and all of our loved one coaches have had a loved one who struggled with addiction that they were supporting through that journey. So we believe in that, the power of the peer and being able to bring our story and our hope and our, encouragement from everything that we've been through. And that kind of leads me into our loved one program, which is another unique thing about our organization is we don't only support the person struggling with addiction, we support people who have loved ones who are struggling with addiction, whether or not their loved one is enrolled in a program with us, because we have a few beliefs. We believe that the person can positively influence their person struggling with addiction to get help. We can improve communication, but we can also kind of just improve that loved one's well-being, because sometimes it's easy just to get completely sucked into that other person's addiction. You forget to take care of yourself. And so we also focus on that self-care for that person as well.
Yeah, I love that. Two things I just want to go back and revisit. Um, the first is what you said about addiction many times, if not all the time, is a side effect of something else that's going on in your life, and it's that way of kind of self-medicating to get through something. So, um, how do you guys go about really unpacking that why, and how did they get to this spot that they're in today? Is that I'm assuming that can be a pretty painful process for many.
Mm. That's such a really good question. So there's a few things that we do. One of the main things is we're a very data driven organization. We like to know, kind of what we're doing is working. So we collect a lot of data on the front end, but that also helps us be able to kind of get a clear picture of like what's going on. And one of our main tools that we use is called the Recovery Capital Index. And so it goes through, many different aspects of wellness, none of them asking about substance use in particular, but asking about your mental and emotional well-being, asking about your finances, asking about the relationships in your life, the social support that you have, all of those things, your sense of purpose. And so when somebody walks in our door, we review that with them. And that's kind of like that first step, like let's look at where we should set some goals around these areas and kind of get your feel for that. But also, whenever I get a new, we call our clients members. Whenever I get a new member, I always like to tell them, I will take this time to get to know you. And, we're going to kind of like start here. But as we continue to work together and the more I get to know you and the more we build this relationship, the better we're going to be able to like actually work on these things, because things are going to come out as you're just going through that process and talking and supporting and doing all of that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that approach. And then talking about the loved one side, it almost sounds like you guys, for anyone who's somewhat familiar with addictions, you guys are really kind of like AA and Al-Anon all tied up together, And when you're talking about the loved ones, I know many times when people are dealing with a loved one who's in addiction, there's that fine line between trying to get them help and enabling them. Um, so how do you guys, kind of define those boundaries of, where helping them ends and enabling them starts?
Hmm. And that's a really interesting question because, you know, I think we've gotten to a place in this field where all enabling is kind of labeled as bad, like a bad thing, but we really truly believe that you can also do like positive enabling to help the person get to a better place. And so the way that I always look at it and the way I try to explain it to people that I'm working with is um, positive enabling is anything that is going to help them make a better choice, so compassionately listening, being able to offer support, effective communication, um, just being there when they need you. Whereas some of that less helpful enabling is some of the things that are preventing them from experiencing some of those natural consequences. Um, and so, and also things that are putting yourself at risk, because as a loved one, sometimes we do things that put ourselves at risk or compromise our own well being. And so that would also be an example of some of that more negative rather than the positive enabling.
Right. Yeah. So, I know one of the challenges, with people who are addicted and getting into recovery, quite frankly, is just the cost of, getting to rehab. And, again, you guys aren't a, true rehabilitation center, so to speak. You take a little bit different approach, but you also take a different approach to your fees as well. So you just want to explain that a little bit to the listeners in case there is anyone out there who's dealing with addiction on their own or has a loved one that's dealing with addiction and they could reach out to you, because I know you guys are located in South Dakota and Colorado, but you don't have to be in South Dakota or Colorado um, to get enrolled in your program. So if you can kind of talk through that a little bit for the listeners.
Yeah. So one thing that we think is very important is we don't ever want cost to be a barrier for somebody being able to receive services. So we've worked really hard to get grant funding. We've worked really hard to do a lot of fundraising in order to provide services. And so in South Dakota and Colorado, a lot of times we are able to get people services at no cost to them. But even people outside of South Dakota and Colorado, we would have them go through a financial screening process. And if they were unable to afford the cost of services, we would definitely not want that to be a barrier. And we do. We see people from all over the nation. I think we've seen a couple of people from the UK. We had a lady in Portugal, Canada. So it's nice because with Zoom and some of the remote telehealth services, we've been able to have a wider reach and touch more people. And, and the cool thing is we've done some studies like from our data, and we see really similar outcomes for in person as we do, via Zoom.
Yeah, and I think, what you guys do and the whole concept Face It Together is kind of almost creating a community, and having that person that you can rely on. And I think that's so important, understanding, for someone who's going through it, to be able to have, someone with that experience, there that they can lean on. And, there's always that sense of, when you are in it together with someone else, that you can get through it a little bit easier. As you kind of look back on your own journey, how much would have a program like Face It Together help you, during, your journey with addiction, that kind of makes you want to give that much more to the people you're working with?
That is such a great point. I think about that often because, I went to I went to treatment, which, was profound for me. I learned so much there, and I'm not against treatment at all. But, that ongoing support when I got out, it was my options were AA and NA, and not that I was against or am against AA and NA, but for me, it was like that group setting, which was never super comfortable for me. I think I needed some more of that one-on-one support. But also there was a lot of things that I really needed to explore, like in regards to, am I going to smoke marijuana, or am I going to drink, or am I going to do these things? And, for me, I opted to not do those things. But I really wish it took me a while to make that decision, but I wish I would have had some support and being able to explore that, which was something I didn't find in, NA, because it's 100% abstinence or nothing. So I almost felt like as I'm having these thoughts, like I just had to keep them to myself because it wasn't a safe place. And so for me, if I would have had just that support that was more tailored to me and where I was at, I think it would have made a world of difference. And also, when I was going through that unhealthy relationship, I think if I would have had somebody to be able to talk to you about some of those things rather than just strictly the substance use stuff, like, because we really are kind of like a life coach who specializes in addiction, I think that would have changed things for me because I would have had support. I would have had somebody being able to help me identify, like, this could be the thing that sinks your ship, and I just I didn't have that anywhere. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what you said about you know, the group setting can be very awkward for a lot of people. I mean, you just don't necessarily want to open up with, 20 other people in the room. It's just not natural for us as humans, where the one-on-one connection, um, it's much easier to break that down. But yet, you as a coach, you need to first gain your client's trust and make them really understand that you are there for them and you do care about their well-being. So what are some of the things that you do in, some of those initial meetings with a new client to really make them understand that you are there to help them. Because another thing I think that addiction deals with is the fact that people don't trust other people. So that's a barrier that you got to break down as a coach early on. So how do you go about approaching that?
Hmm. That's such a great question. So, I always want to start off with building that rapport. I don't ever want to push somebody to go too far too fast. And for me, I know that like addiction was such a shame-based process, and so I work really hard to, first of all, I want people to feel understood. I want people to feel heard. I want to let people know that they have the space to make their own decisions. I'm not going to tell them what they need to do. I'm going to try to understand what it is that they want to do. And then, you know, I'm not afraid to share some of those shameful things that I went through and I experienced to help people feel connected and to help them realize also that I'm not the only one, because that can be the ticket sometimes. Like, I am not the only one. And like, and she's here now. Like, she's doing okay. She's not like that person that she was. So you can heal. And so just me being vulnerable, I feel like allows them to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Then, how do you think we go about, um, breaking down, there's a lot of times where, you know, once you bring up the topic of addiction, all of a sudden, um, there's this, just weird, silence or, taboo subject, and people don't want to talk about it yet. The only way we're going to get to a better place as society is to have these conversations and bring it out in the open. And, it goes hand in hand with just mental health in general. So,
Mm.
how do you think we continue to break those down? Because we have made some progress,
Mhm.
but I think we've got a long way to go. What do you think the best steps are to, make it more of a mainstream, you know, conversation and make people really understand what the root cause is?
That's a really great question. I think first of all, you're right. I think we have made some strides into, there's a lot more like drug court type programs rather than just like incarcerating people right away. But I think that's a main part of the problem is we've criminalized people struggling with addiction. And so, rather than like rallying behind these people to support them, which is probably what they need, is that support and that love and that guidance, we are isolating them, shaming them, and pushing them further into the recesses. And so people aren't reaching out for help in the way that they may be if, it wasn't so stigmatized. So I think one of our goals as an organization is to break that stigma. And I think if we could just, any ally of the addiction community, if we could just work to break that stigma and openly communicate, and people who have overcome their addictions, being able to share that story, because I think that there are a lot of like misconceptions that people don't get better, but people do get better. A lot of people get better.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And you're living proof of that people do get better.
Thank you.
Um, so we're, is there anything, and we've covered a lot here, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure the listeners know about?
I think I did a really great job of covering anything. I think more than anything, like if I were to put a message out there, if you're struggling, whether you think our services are right for you or not, reach out. Like, we're just here to talk. There's no commitment, there's no requirements for engaging in service, but we have a great first impressions team that will help, if even if we're not in the right program, help steer you in the right direction. Because there is support out there and there are people that care. And so, take advantage of that.
Yeah, I love that. And if any of the listeners, like I said, are going through this themselves or have a loved one that's going through it, how do they get a hold of you guys? Where can they find you on the internet and reach out to have that first conversation?
Yes, great question. So the best way to get a hold of us is on our website. It is wefaceit.together.org. And so if you go to our website, it has our phone number on there, our email address. You can call, text, or you can even just fill out a submission on the website and somebody will reach back out to you. So we try to be very flexible in how you are able to reach out to us because we know everybody has different comfort levels. So whatever works best for you.
Right. And again, just to stress to the listeners, you can be located anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and reach out for these services. So I think that's something you can definitely want to drive home to the listeners as well, that they do not have to be in South Dakota or Colorado to do that. And then you guys are a nonprofit organization, so if there's anybody listening, I believe there's some links to donate on the website as well. So if it's someone who has been, again, just exposed to addiction and they want to help what you guys are doing, they're touched by the mission that you guys have. If I recall from being on your website, it's pretty easy to get there and make a donation. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Up in the right-hand corner, I think is a donation link. So
Excellent. All right. Well, Katie, that brings me to my final question. And the subtitle of the podcast, as you know, is many little people in many little places. And that's derived from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes. So it's one of the little things that Katie does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
I think just love, honestly. I just try to greet everybody with a smile and really just hear what people are saying rather than like making assumptions and walking in thinking that I know somebody. I really just want to give everybody the opportunity to be heard, to be understood, and to be loved.
Love that. Love that answer. I really appreciate the conversation. Again, this is a topic that needs to be talked about. Need to break that stigma. So I really appreciate you taking the time. And for those out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. And while you're there, pick up a copy of the most recent book, The Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1. Katie, thanks again for the time. I really appreciate the conversation and love the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for having me here.
Bet.